In the vast, endless expanse of space, where stars twinkled like scattered diamonds and silence reigned supreme, Captain Elias Voss sat at the helm of his aging starship, the Aurora. It was a modest vessel, patched together with salvaged parts and held together by sheer willpower. Despite its worn exterior, it had carried Elias and his small crew through countless adventures across galaxies. But today felt different, calmer yet heavier, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Elias leaned back in his chair, staring out into the void through the cracked viewport. His fingers drummed absently on the control panel as he listened to the hum of the engines. Behind him, Dr. Lyra Chen, the ship's medic, adjusted her glasses while reviewing data on a tablet. Across the room, Jax, the gruff but loyal engineer, tinkered with a malfunctioning console, muttering under his breath about outdated wiring. The rest of the crew moved quietly about their tasks, each lost in their own thoughts. "Anything interesting out there?" Lyra asked, glancing up from her work. "Not unless you count another boring day floating through empty space," Elias replied with a wry smile. He turned slightly toward her. "But hey, who knows? Maybe we'll stumble upon something exciting for once." As if on cue, the ship's sensors beeped sharply, breaking the monotony. Elias straightened immediately, his eyes narrowing as he studied the readings flashing across the screen. "What's this?" he murmured, tapping a few commands into the interface. A faint signal appeared, a derelict alien vessel drifting silently in the darkness. Its hull was battered and scorched, evidence of some catastrophic event that had left it lifeless. Yet, curiously, the ship wasn't completely dead. Faint energy signatures pulsed weakly from within, suggesting there might still be someone, or something, alive inside. "Well, looks like your wish came true," Lyra said dryly, crossing her arms. "Should we check it out?" Jax snorted. "Or maybe we shouldn't. You know how these things usually go. Derelict ships mean trouble, boss." Elias hesitated, weighing the risks. Space exploration often led to unexpected dangers, and investigating unknown vessels was rarely without consequences. But something tugged at him, an inexplicable pull, almost like intuition whispering in his ear. Perhaps it was curiosity, or simply the hope of finding something extraordinary amid the emptiness. "We're checking it out," he decided finally, his voice steady. "Suit up, everyone. Let's see what's waiting for us." Minutes later, clad in protective suits and armed with handheld scanners, Elias and his team boarded a shuttle and approached the mysterious craft. Up close, the damage was even more severe than it had appeared from afar. Deep gashes marred the sleek surface, and jagged pieces of metal jutted out like broken bones. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been an accident. Using cutting tools, they forced open an airlock and stepped cautiously inside. The interior was eerily silent, save for the occasional groan of stressed metal. Strange symbols adorned the walls, glowing faintly in hues of blue and green. The air smelled metallic, tinged with something unfamiliar yet strangely sweet. "This place gives me the creeps," Jax muttered, gripping his scanner tightly. "Feels like we're walking into a graveyard." "Stay focused," Elias ordered, though his own nerves prickled uneasily. They moved deeper into the ship, following the faint energy readings. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a medical bay, or at least its alien equivalent. In the center of the room lay a figure sprawled motionlessly on a platform. Elias froze, his heart skipping a beat. The figure was small, no taller than a child, with translucent skin that shimmered softly despite being deathly pale. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed faintly along her arms and face, casting an ethereal glow around her. Her features were delicate, almost otherworldly, with large, almond-shaped eyes closed tightly in unconsciousness. "She's alive," Lyra whispered, rushing forward to examine her. She gently placed a hand on the girl's forehead, feeling for warmth. "Barely. We need to get her back to the ship now." Jax frowned, stepping closer. "Are you sure about this? What if she's dangerous?" Aliens aren't exactly known for being friendly. Elias didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared down at the fragile creature before him, feeling a pang of compassion he couldn't explain. Whatever she was, whatever she represented, leaving her here to die felt wrong. Deeply wrong. "We're taking her with us," he said firmly. "If nothing else, she deserves a chance." Lyra nodded, already preparing a portable medical kit. Together, they carefully lifted the girl onto a stretcher and carried her back to the shuttle. As they departed the derelict vessel, Elias glanced over his shoulder one last time. Something told him this decision would change everything, for better or worse. Back aboard the Aurora, the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize their unexpected guest. Hours passed as Lyra monitored her vitals, administering treatments and adjusting equipment. Slowly but surely, the girl began to show signs of improvement. Her breathing steadied, and the bioluminescent patterns on her skin brightened ever so slightly. When she finally opened her eyes, they were unlike anything any of them had seen before. Deep pools of swirling colors that seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. For a moment, she simply stared at Elias, her expression unreadable. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke a single word: "Thank you." The alien girl's recovery was slow but steady, a process that captivated the entire crew of the Aurora. Each day brought new developments, as if her body were rediscovering life after being on the brink of death. Dr. Lyra Chen spent most of her time tending to the mysterious patient, running tests and monitoring her progress. Despite the lack of knowledge about her species, Lyra worked tirelessly, determined to help the fragile creature regain strength. At first, the girl remained silent, her large, luminous eyes observing everything around her, with an intensity that made some members of the crew uneasy. She seemed to study their movements, their expressions, and even the way they spoke. It wasn't long before she began mimicking them, tilting her head when someone tilted theirs, smiling faintly when greeted warmly, or raising a hand in greeting when others did the same. These small gestures fascinated Lyra, who noted how quickly the girl adapted despite having no prior exposure to human behavior. "She's learning," Lyra remarked one evening during dinner in the ship's common area. "It's almost like she's absorbing everything we do and trying to understand us." Captain Elias Voss glanced up from his meal, curiosity flickering in his gaze. "Do you think she understands what we're saying?" Lyra shrugged thoughtfully. "Hard to say. Her brain activity is unlike anything I've seen before. It's incredibly complex, but there's definitely intelligence there. She might not grasp our language yet, but she's picking up context clues." Jax, ever skeptical, leaned back in his chair with a grunt. "Or maybe she's just copying us because it amuses her. Who knows with aliens? They're unpredictable." Elias shot him a warning look. "We're not assuming anything until we know more. For now, she's under our care, and we treat her with respect." Despite Jax's reservations, the rest of the crew couldn't help but grow fond of the girl. She had a quiet charm about her, a sense of innocence that softened even the hardest hearts. When she smiled, it lit up the room in a way no one could ignore. Even Jax found himself sneaking glances at her when he thought no one was looking. As days turned into weeks, the girl became more interactive. She started exploring the ship cautiously, trailing behind Lyra or occasionally wandering off on her own. One day, while following Elias through the corridors, she paused near a viewport and gazed out at the stars. Her expression shifted, becoming distant and wistful, as though she recognized something familiar in the endless expanse. Elias stopped and watched her curiously. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, though he knew she wouldn't understand. To his surprise, she turned to face him, her glowing eyes locking onto his with startling clarity. For a moment, it felt as though she were searching for something deep within him. Then, without warning, she reached out and touched his arm gently. The contact sent a shiver down his spine, not out of fear, but because it felt significant, as if she were trying to convey gratitude or perhaps something deeper. She seems drawn to you, Lyra observed later when Elias shared the encounter with her. Maybe saving her created some kind of bond. Or maybe she's just curious, Elias replied, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than mere curiosity. One afternoon, while the girl sat quietly in the medical bay, she suddenly pointed to a nearby monitor displaying star charts and images of planets. Her finger traced over the screen, lingering on certain constellations before moving on. Lyra noticed this and retrieved a tablet, pulling up additional maps and diagrams. To everyone's astonishment, the girl began interacting with the device, touching specific points and making soft noises that sounded almost musical. "She's communicating," Lyra exclaimed excitedly. "Not verbally, but she's expressing interest in these locations. Maybe they're important to her." Word spread quickly among the crew, sparking debates about the girl's origins. Some speculated she came from a distant star system marked by unusual energy readings, while others wondered if she belonged to a nomadic race that traveled across galaxies. No one could agree, but all were eager to learn more. It wasn't until several days later that the girl finally attempted verbal communication. While sitting with Elias in the observation lounge, she hesitated for a long moment before speaking in halting, broken universal speech, the closest thing to a galactic lingua franca. "Prin. Cess," she whispered, her voice shaky but clear. Elias blinked, startled. "What did you say?" She repeated the word, firmer this time. "Princess." The revelation sent shockwaves through the crew. If she truly was royalty, then her presence aboard the Aurora carried implications far beyond anything they'd anticipated. Questions swirled in their minds. Was she fleeing danger? Had she been kidnapped? Or was her survival tied to some larger cosmic event? Lyra approached her cautiously. "Are you a princess?" she asked gently. The girl nodded slowly, her glowing eyes filled with both pride and sadness. Though she couldn't elaborate further, her demeanor suggested she carried a heavy burden, one that weighed heavily on her young shoulders. That night, Elias stood alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The girl's identity loomed over him like a shadow, casting doubt and wonder in equal measure. He had saved her out of instinct, driven by compassion rather than logic. Now, he realized, his decision might have set them on a path far greater and more perilous than he'd ever imagined. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of the girl standing quietly in the doorway. She watched him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher, as though she were waiting for him to make the next move. For the first time since finding her, Elias felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. Their fates were intertwined now, bound together by a single act of kindness in the vastness of space. The revelation that the alien girl was a princess sent ripples through the crew of the Aurora. What had once seemed like an act of simple compassion now carried far-reaching implications. The weight of their discovery pressed heavily on Captain Elias Voss, who spent long hours pacing the ship's corridors, lost in thought. If she truly was royalty, then her survival, or capture, could tip the balance of power in some distant corner of the galaxy. Dr. Lyra Chen, ever the voice of reason, tried to reassure him during one of his restless nights. "We don't know the full story yet," she said gently as they sat together in the dimly lit observation lounge. "For all we know, she might not even be involved in any conflict." Elias sighed, rubbing his temples. "That's what worries me. We've stepped into something bigger than us, Lyra. Whether we like it or not, her presence here makes us part of whatever storm is brewing out there." As if on cue, the ship's sensors began picking up unusual activity just days after the girl's revelation. Strange vessels appeared on the edge of their scanners. Fast-moving ships with sleek, angular designs that didn't match any known species' fleets. At first, they kept their distance, but soon enough, the mysterious ships began tailing the Aurora, staying just far enough away to avoid direct confrontation. "They're following us," Jax announced grimly as he analyzed the readings in the cockpit. and I don't think they're friendly. Elias joined him at the controls, his jaw tightening as he studied the data. Any idea who they are? Jax shook his head. Not a clue. But judging by those weapons arrays, they mean business. The tension aboard the ship grew palpable. Conversations became hushed, and everyone moved with a sense of unease. Even the girl seemed affected, retreating into herself and spending more time alone in the medical bay. Her glowing eyes, once filled with curiosity and wonder, now reflected a quiet sadness, as though she understood the danger looming over them. One evening, while the crew gathered in the common area to discuss their next move, the girl entered quietly. She hesitated near the doorway before approaching Elias, her steps hesitant but deliberate. When she reached him, she placed a small hand on his arm and looked up at him with pleading eyes. "What's wrong?" Elias asked softly, kneeling down to meet her gaze. She struggled for a moment, her lips moving silently as she searched for words. Finally, she managed to whisper two fragmented phrases: Zitharan, Empire. The room fell silent. The name meant nothing to most of the crew, but its ominous ring sent chills down their spines. Elias exchanged a glance with Lyra, who quickly pulled up information on her tablet. After a few tense moments, she spoke. "The Zitharan Empire," she read aloud. "A militaristic faction known for conquering planets and suppressing rebellions across multiple star systems. They're ruthless, efficient, and feared throughout this quadrant." Jax let out a low whistle. "Great. Just what we needed. A bunch of space tyrants breathing down our necks." But why would they care about her? Lyra wondered aloud, glancing at the girl. If she's a princess, does that mean she's connected to them somehow? The girl nodded slowly, her expression growing somber. She pointed to herself, then mind being chased, her movements frantic. It was clear she was trying to convey a message, that the Zitharans were hunting her. Elias frowned, piecing things together. "You think they want you back? Why?" Her response came in broken fragments. "Peace, treaty, stop war." Lyra gasped, her eyes widening. "Wait, if she's tied to a peace treaty, then she must be incredibly valuable. Maybe her survival means ending a conflict. Or starting one," Jax muttered darkly. The gravity of the situation hit them all at once. This wasn't just about protecting an innocent life anymore. It was about choosing sides in a galactic struggle. Returning the girl to the Zitharans could prevent further bloodshed, but handing her over might also doom countless lives if she truly held the key to peace. "We can't make that decision lightly," Elias said firmly. "We need more information. Until then, we protect her." His words did little to ease the crew's anxiety. Over the next few days, the Zitharan ships closed in, their intentions becoming clearer. One night, a transmission crackled through the comm system. A stern, authoritative voice boomed across the ship, demanding their immediate compliance. "This is Commander Vorthak of the Zitharan Empire. You are harboring a fugitive of great importance to our people. Surrender her immediately, or face the consequences." The message repeated several times before cutting off abruptly. The crew stared at each other in stunned silence, the ultimatum hanging heavy in the air. "That settles it," Jax grumbled. "They're coming for her, no matter what we do." Elias clenched his fists, determination hardening his features. "Then we prepare for the worst. If they want her, they'll have to fight for her." Over the next few hours, the crew scrambled to fortify the ship, rerouting power to shields and arming themselves with whatever weapons they could muster. Meanwhile, the girl remained unusually calm, watching their preparations with quiet resolve. When Elias approached her later, she reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You saved me once," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "Thank you." Elias felt a lump rise in his throat. He didn't fully understand her role in the larger conflict, but one thing was certain. Abandoning her now wasn't an option. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. As the Zitharan fleet drew closer, the Aurora sped toward a nearby asteroid field, hoping to use its jagged terrain as cover. The chase was on, and the crew braced themselves for what promised to be a harrowing battle. Amidst the chaos, the girl stood beside Elias in the cockpit, her glowing form a beacon of hope amidst the shadows of war. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Elias knew one thing for sure: their journey was only beginning. And somewhere deep within him, he believed that saving her had been the right choice, not just for her sake, but for the future of countless others whose fates now rested in their hands. The chase through the asteroid field was a test of skill, nerve, and sheer luck. Captain Elias Voss gripped the controls of the Aurora tightly, his knuckles white, as he maneuvered the ship between jagged rocks that loomed like ancient sentinels in the darkness. Behind them, the Zitharan fleet followed relentlessly, their sleek warships weaving through the chaos with terrifying precision. Explosions lit up the void as stray blasts from enemy cannons struck nearby asteroids, sending shards of rock spiraling into space. Inside the cockpit, tension crackled like static electricity. Dr. Lyra Chen monitored the ship's systems, calling out warnings whenever shields dipped dangerously low. Jax manned the auxiliary controls, rerouting power to keep the engines running at maximum capacity. The rest of the crew worked feverishly to patch breaches and reinforce defenses, their faces pale but resolute. Amidst the chaos, the alien girl remained eerily calm. She stood beside Elias, her glowing form casting soft light across the cramped space. Her eyes were fixed on the viewport, watching the deadly dance of ships and debris outside. Though she didn't speak, her presence seemed to steady those around her, a quiet reminder of why they were fighting so hard. As the pursuit wore on, the girl began experiencing strange episodes. At first, they were fleeting. Momentary lapses where her expression would shift, and her hands would twitch as though reaching for something unseen. But soon, these moments grew more intense. One night, while resting in the medical bay, she suddenly gasped and clutched her head, her body trembling violently. Lyra rushed to her side, alarmed. "What's happening? Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head, struggling to breathe. Then, without warning, images flooded her mind. Fragmented memories of towering palaces bathed in golden light, vast armies clashing beneath blood-red skies, and whispered conversations about treaties and alliances. These weren't just random flashes, they were pieces of her past, slowly piecing themselves together in her consciousness. When the episode subsided, she looked up at Lyra with wide, tear-filled eyes. "I'd remember," she whispered hoarsely. "Me, Lysara." Elias arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. "Lysara," he repeated, kneeling beside her. "Is that your name?" She nodded weakly. "Yes." "Crown, Princess of Zithara." Her voice wavered, but there was no mistaking the pride and pain in her words. Over the next few days, Lysara began sharing fragments of her story. Through halting speech and gestures, she explained how her people had been locked in a brutal civil war for generations. The conflict had torn apart families, destroyed cities, and left entire planets uninhabitable. In a desperate bid for peace, her parents, the rulers of Zithara, had negotiated a secret treaty with rival factions, hoping to unite their fractured empire under a single banner. But not everyone wanted peace. Lysara continued, her tone heavy with sorrow. Some feared losing power. They tried to stop the treaty by killing us. Her transport had been ambushed during an evacuation attempt, leaving her presumed dead. Somehow, she had survived, drifting alone until Elias and his crew found her. Now she realized her survival wasn't just a matter of chance, it was destiny. Hidden within her neural implant was the final copy of the treaty, encoded with safeguards only she could activate. "This is why they're chasing us," she said, her voice growing stronger. "If I die, the treaty dies with me. Without it, the war will never end." The revelation stunned the crew. They had unknowingly become custodians of hope, not just for Lysara's people, but for countless others caught in the crossfire. Yet, with the Zitharans closing in, their options were limited. Returning her meant surrendering to forces that might use the treaty for oppression rather than unity. Fleeing indefinitely wasn't sustainable either. The Aurora couldn't outrun an entire fleet forever. "We need allies," Elias declared during an emergency meeting in the common area. "People who can help protect Lysara and ensure the treaty reaches the right hands." Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "There are neutral factions in this region, species and organizations that oppose the Zitherans' aggression. If we can reach one of their outposts, we might find support." Jax frowned, crossing his arms. "And what if they turn on us too? We're sticking our necks out for someone we barely know." Lysara stepped forward, her luminous eyes locking onto Jax's skeptical gaze. "You saved my life when you didn't have to," she said softly. "Now I ask you to trust me. This treaty isn't just for my people, it's for everyone who believes in peace." Her words resonated deeply, even with Jax, whose usual gruff exterior softened slightly. After a long pause, he sighed. "Fine, but don't expect me to start singing songs about hope anytime soon." With a plan in place, the crew plotted a course to a nearby rendezvous point, a remote station operated by the Concord Alliance, a coalition of species dedicated to diplomacy and cooperation. The journey would be perilous, requiring them to navigate through treacherous nebulae and evade Zitharan patrols. But failure wasn't an option, not when so much depended on their success. As the Aurora prepared to make the jump to hyperspace, Elias approached Lysara privately. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Activating the treaty could put you in even more danger." She smiled faintly, her glow brightening like a star emerging from shadow. "I've spent my life running," she admitted. "But now, I know why I survived. To bring peace. Whatever happens next, I'm ready." Her courage inspired him, filling him with a renewed sense of purpose. As the ship surged forward into the unknown, Elias felt a spark of hope ignite within him, a belief that perhaps, against all odds, they could change the course of history. Behind them, the Zitharan fleet pursued relentlessly, unaware that their quarry carried not just a princess, but the key to a brighter future. And aboard the Aurora, a small crew of humans and one extraordinary alien prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by a shared vision of peace among the stars. The journey to the rendezvous point was fraught with tension, every second stretching like an eternity. The Aurora limped through space, its systems pushed to their limits after days of evading Zitharan patrols and navigating treacherous nebulae. The crew worked tirelessly, repairing damage and rerouting power to keep the ship running. Despite their exhaustion, there was a shared sense of determination, a fragile hope that they were close to finding allies who could help protect Lysara and her mission. Lysara herself remained calm, almost serene, despite the chaos swirling around her. She spent much of her time in the observation lounge, gazing out at the stars as if drawing strength from their distant light. Occasionally, she would join Elias or Lyra in the cockpit, offering quiet words of encouragement. Her presence had become a beacon for the crew, reminding them why they continued to fight against overwhelming odds. But not everyone shared their resolve. Late one night, while most of the crew slept, Jax sat alone in the common area, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee. His usual gruff demeanor was replaced by a troubled frown, his mind racing with doubts. He glanced toward the corner of the room where Lysara rested quietly, her glowing form casting soft shadows on the walls. As much as he wanted to believe in her cause, fear gnawed at him. The fear of what might happen if the Zitherans caught up to them. "They'll kill us all," he muttered under his breath. "And for what? A treaty we don't even understand." His thoughts were interrupted when another crew member entered the room. Rhea, the communications officer. Rhea was young and idealistic, often seen as the heart of the team. But tonight, her expression was unusually serious. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting across from him. Jax shrugged. "Not really. Too much on my mind." Rhea hesitated before speaking. "You don't trust her, do you?" He avoided her gaze. It's not about trust. It's about survival. We're risking everything for someone who might not even be able to deliver on her promises. She saved us once, Rhea reminded him gently. Remember that derelict ship? If it weren't for her, we'd still be floating aimlessly out there. That's different, Jax snapped. She didn't ask to be saved back then. Now she's dragging us into a war we don't belong in. Rhea leaned forward, her voice firm. Maybe. Or maybe this is bigger than us. Maybe this is our chance to make a difference, to stand for something greater than ourselves. Jax opened his mouth to argue, but stopped short. There was no denying the truth in her words. Deep down, he knew she was right. But the weight of responsibility terrified him. What if they failed? What if their sacrifices only made things worse? As the days passed, Jax's unease grew, manifesting in sharp comments and thinly veiled hostility. He began questioning Elias' decisions more openly, challenging every move they made. The rest of the crew noticed the growing rift, but no one dared confront him directly, for fear of making matters worse. Then came the betrayal. One evening, as the crew gathered in the cockpit to review their approach to the rendezvous station, alarms blared suddenly throughout the ship. A distress signal lit up the console, indicating that their location had been compromised. How did they find us? Lyra exclaimed, panic creeping into her voice. Elias scanned the readouts, his jaw tightening. Someone sent a transmission. Someone aboard this ship leaked our position. The accusation hung heavy in the air, turning the cramped cockpit into a powder keg of suspicion. Accusatory glances darted between crew members, each person silently wondering who among them could have betrayed their trust. Before anyone could speak, Jack stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. "It was me," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. A stunned silence followed. Elias stared at him, disbelief etched across his features. "Why, Jax? Why would you do this?" Jax clenched his fists, shame flickering in his eyes. I thought it would save us. I contacted the Zitherans, told them we'd hand over the princess if they promised to leave us alone." "You idiot," Rhea shouted, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you see? They'll destroy us the moment they get what they want." Elias stepped closer to Jax, his voice low but filled with anger. "We trusted you, all of us. And now, because of your fear, we're putting Lysara, and ourselves, in even greater danger." Jax looked away, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "I'm sorry," he muttered. I couldn't take the risk anymore." Lysara, who had been watching silently from the corner, finally spoke. Her voice was steady, though tinged with sadness. "Do not blame him," she said softly. "Fear can make people do terrible things, but it can also teach them courage." Her words struck a chord, silencing the room. For all her grace and wisdom, she refused to condemn Jax for his actions. Instead, she turned to Elias. "We must act quickly. The Zitherans will be here soon." Elias nodded, pushing aside his anger to focus on the task at hand. "All right, listen up. We're going to use the asteroid field near the rendezvous station as cover. If we can reach the Concord Alliance outpost before they catch us, we still have a chance." The crew sprang into action, preparing for what promised to be their most dangerous maneuver yet. As the Aurora hurtled toward the dense cluster of rocks, the Zitharan fleet closed in rapidly, their weapons charging for a final assault. In the chaos that followed, Lysara proved her loyalty once more. When a stray blast breached the hull, threatening to expose the cockpit to vacuum, she used her own body to seal the gap, enduring immense pain to protect those inside. Her selflessness reignited the crew's determination, galvanizing them to fight harder than ever before. Against all odds, they managed to evade capture, reaching the safety of the Concord Alliance station moments before the Zitherans could intercept them. As the battered ship docked, Elias turned to Lysara, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We made it," he said, exhaling deeply. "Thanks to you." She smiled faintly, her glow dimmed but unbroken. "No, Captain. Thanks to all of you." Though the journey ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Betrayal had tested their bonds, but it had also strengthened their resolve. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by a shared purpose and the unwavering belief that peace was worth fighting for. The Concord Alliance outpost was a sprawling structure nestled within the jagged embrace of an asteroid field, its metallic spires glinting faintly in the dim light of a distant star. To the weary crew of the Aurora, it felt like a sanctuary, a fragile bastion of hope amidst the chaos that had pursued them across the stars. As they docked and disembarked, Lysera stepped cautiously onto the station's docking bay floor, her glowing form casting soft shadows on the walls. Her presence drew curious stares from the Concord personnel, but there was no time for introductions. Captain Elias Voss wasted no time explaining their situation to Commander Sila Neris, the leader of the outpost. A tall, imposing figure with sharp features and piercing gray eyes, Sila listened intently as Elias recounted their journey, the discovery of Lysera, the relentless pursuit by the Zitharan Empire, and the importance of the treaty hidden within her neural implant. "This isn't just about saving one life," Elias concluded, his voice firm. "It's about ending a war that's tearing apart entire worlds." Sila studied him carefully before turning her gaze toward Lysera. "And you're certain this treaty can unite your people?" she asked, skepticism lacing her tone. Lysera nodded, her luminous eyes unwavering. "I carry the final copy of the agreement. Without it, peace is impossible." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Sila straightened, her expression hardening into one of resolve. "Very well. We'll help you activate the beacon and broadcast the treaty. But know this, the Zitharans won't stop until they've silenced you. They'll come here, and when they do, we'll need to be ready." With little time to spare, preparations began immediately. Engineers scrambled to set up defensive turrets along the outpost's perimeter, while pilots prepped a fleet of small fighter ships. Inside, Lysera worked closely with Lyra Chen and a team of Concord technicians to decode the safeguards protecting the treaty data. It was a painstaking process, requiring both technical expertise and Lysera's unique biological input. As hours turned into days, tensions mounted. The crew of the Aurora pitched in wherever they could, fortifying defenses or assisting with logistics. Jax, still burdened by guilt over his betrayal, threw himself into repairing damaged equipment, working tirelessly to make amends. Rhea coordinated communications between the outpost and nearby allies, rallying support from neutral factions willing to stand against the Zitharans. Elias, meanwhile, spent much of his time strategizing with Sila. Together, they devised a plan to hold off the enemy long enough for Lysera to complete the activation sequence. It was a risky gamble, one that relied heavily on timing and sheer determination. "They'll hit us hard," Sila warned during one of their briefings. "Their numbers are overwhelming, and they won't hesitate to destroy everything in their path." "We've faced worse odds before," Elias replied, though his voice betrayed a hint of doubt. "If we can buy Lysera even a few minutes, it might be enough." On the third day, the inevitable arrived. Sensors detected a massive Zitharan fleet approaching the outpost, their ships blotting out the stars like a swarm of locusts. Alarms blared throughout the station, signaling the start of what would likely be its last stand. "Everyone to your positions," Sila barked over the comm system. "We fight together, or die trying." The battle erupted with terrifying intensity. The Zitharans unleashed wave after wave of fighters, bombarding the outpost's shields and strafing its outer defenses. Explosions rocked the structure, shaking the very foundations of the station. Amidst the chaos, Elias led a squadron of fighters into the fray, engaging the enemy head-on to draw fire away from the vulnerable core where Lysera worked. Inside the command center, Lysera focused all her energy on the activation process. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she interfaced with the console, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. Around her, technicians shouted updates and warnings, their voices blending into a cacophony of urgency. "How much longer?" Lyra demanded, clutching the edge of the console as another blast shook the room. "Almost there," Lysara whispered, her voice strained. "Just a little more." Outside, the defenders fought valiantly, holding the line despite being outnumbered. Jax manned a turret on the outpost's exterior, firing relentlessly at incoming ships. His earlier fear had transformed into raw determination. Each shot fired a testament to his redemption. Nearby, Rhea coordinated reinforcements, her voice steady despite the pandemonium around her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lysara let out a triumphant cry. "It's done. The beacon is activated." A surge of relief swept through the command center as the treaty data began broadcasting across the galaxy. Moments later, ships from rival factions loyal to Lysara's cause began arriving, answering the call for unity. The tide of the battle shifted dramatically as these new allies joined the fray, turning the Zitharan assault into a chaotic stalemate. But victory came at a cost. The outpost's defenses were crumbling, and many lives had been lost in the desperate struggle. As the surviving crew members regrouped inside the command center, Elias approached Lysara, who stood silently watching the unfolding events outside. "You did it," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You gave them hope." She turned to him, tears shimmering in her glowing eyes. "Because of you, Captain, you never gave up on me." Though the battle wasn't fully over, the outcome was clear. The seeds of peace had been sown, and as Lysara prepared to leave the outpost to fulfill her destiny, Elias knew their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Together, they had ignited a spark, a chance for a brighter future in a fractured galaxy. The aftermath of the battle left the Concord Alliance outpost battered but standing, a testament to the resilience of those who had fought so fiercely to protect it. Smoke curled from damaged sections of the structure, and the hum of repair drones filled the air as engineers worked tirelessly to patch breaches and restore systems. Despite the scars, there was an undeniable sense of triumph among the survivors. The treaty beacon continued to broadcast its message across the galaxy, reaching planets and factions far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Lysara stood at the edge of the outpost observation deck, gazing out at the stars with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Her luminous form shimmered faintly, though her glow seemed dimmer now, perhaps a reflection of the weight she carried. Around her, the crew of the Aurora gathered quietly, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also quiet admiration for the young princess who had inspired them all. "You've done something incredible," Elias said, stepping beside her. His voice was soft, tinged with both awe and gratitude. "This changes everything, for your people, and maybe even for the rest of us." She turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "It is only the beginning," she replied gently. "The treaty gives everyone a choice, to fight or to heal. But whether they choose peace depends on their hearts, not mine." Elias nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. For all her strength and courage, Lysara knew that true unity required more than just a document. It demanded trust, forgiveness, and a willingness to let go of old grievances. Still, the beacon represented hope, a chance for warring factions to lay down arms and rebuild what years of conflict had destroyed. As word of the treaty spread, ships began arriving from distant corners of the galaxy. Leaders from rival factions stepped forward, drawn by curiosity and desperation alike. Some came reluctantly, their skepticism evident in their hardened expressions. Others arrived with cautious optimism, eager to hear Lysara's proposal. The observation deck soon became a makeshift council chamber, where voices once raised in anger now mingled in tentative dialogue. When it was time for Lysara to address them, she took a deep breath and stepped onto a raised platform at the center of the room. All eyes turned to her, some wary, others curious, but none indifferent. She scanned the crowd slowly, taking in the diversity of species and cultures before speaking. "I am Lysara, Crown Princess of Zithara," she began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "I stand before you not as a ruler, but as someone who has seen the cost of war and the promise of peace. This treaty is not just for my people. It is for all who believe that cooperation is stronger than division, that understanding can overcome hatred." Her words resonated deeply, stirring emotions long buried beneath layers of fear and mistrust. One by one, leaders rose to speak, sharing stories of loss, resilience, and dreams of a better future. Though disagreements lingered, there was a shared acknowledgement that continuing the cycle of violence would only lead to ruin. Slowly but surely, alliances began to form, fragile yet hopeful. Amidst the discussions, Elias found himself reflecting on how far they'd come since discovering Lysera aboard the derelict vessel. What had started as an act of compassion had evolved into something far greater, a catalyst for change that transcended borders and beliefs. He glanced around the room, catching sight of his crew. Lyra stood nearby, smiling faintly as she listened to the conversations unfolding around them. Jax leaned against a wall, his usual scowl replaced by a thoughtful expression. Even Rhea, who rarely stopped moving, paused to take in the historic moment. Later that evening, as the council adjourned for the day, Lysera sought Elias out privately. She held something small and crystalline in her hand, a shard of alien technology that pulsed softly with light. "This is for you," she said, pressing it into his palm. "It is a symbol of alliance between humans and Scytherans, a reminder that even in the darkest times, acts of kindness can light the way." Elias stared at the artifact, its gentle glow warming his fingers. "Thank you," he murmured, his throat tight with emotion. "But I think we're the ones who should be thanking you." She shook her head, her smile bittersweet. "No, Captain. You saved me when I needed it most, and because of you, I found the strength to save others." The following morning, Lysera prepared to leave the outpost. A delegation of loyalists had arrived to escort her back to Cythera, where she would oversee the implementation of the treaty. As she boarded their ship, she paused and turned back to face Elias and his crew one last time. "Do you remember who I am, human?" she asked softly, her voice carrying across the distance. Elias smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "I'm the girl you saved," he replied, echoing her earlier words. "And I'll never forget." With that, she disappeared into the ship, leaving behind a legacy of hope that would ripple through the galaxy for generations to come. As the vessel ascended into the stars, Elias felt a profound sense of fulfillment. They had faced unimaginable challenges, endured betrayal and loss, and emerged stronger because of it. Back aboard the Aurora, the crew gathered in the common area to share a meal together, a rare moment of calm after weeks of turmoil. Laughter returned to their conversations, and for the first time in a long while, the weight of uncertainty lifted. "What happens now?" Rhea asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Elias leaned back in his chair, gazing thoughtfully at the viewport. "Now we keep exploring. There are still countless worlds out there waiting to be discovered, and countless lives we might touch along the way." Jack snorted, though there was no malice in his tone. "Just promise me we won't stumble into another intergalactic war anytime soon." The room erupted in laughter, easing the lingering tension. As the ship drifted further into the unknown, Elias couldn't help but feel optimistic about the road ahead. Their journey with Lysera had reminded them of something vital, that even in the vastness of space, one act of kindness could ignite a spark capable of changing the course of history. And somewhere, amidst the endless expanse of stars, that spark continued to burn brightly, a beacon of hope for all who dared to dream of a better tomorrow.